let us talk about cakes. In this mouthwatering video, we're diving headfirst into the world of cakes. From the delicate artistry of patisseries to the comforting nostalgia of homemade treats, join us as we explore the diverse textures, flavors, and stories behind them. Whether you're a professional baker or simply someone who bakes at home, grab your fork and get ready to indulge as we slice into the enchanting universe of cakes. Cakes are the main character in birthday parties, weddings, or any kind of momentous celebrations. It brings joy and a special vibe to the event. Although cake can increase your blood sugar, it satisfies your sweet tooth. But hey, don't forget to brush your teeth after eating it to maintain your beautiful smile. In this episode, we will talk about the history of cake and some interesting facts about them. So, what is cake and why do we call it cake? According to Oxford English Dictionary, the word cake came from the 13th century of the Norse word kaka, with a Viking origin. Cake is mainly made of flour, sugar, leavening agents, and other ingredients. In the old times, cakes were bread-like, and they used honey to sweeten it up. Nuts or dry fruits were used too. Unlike the modern cakes that are sweetened with sugar and decorated with icings and fondant, sugars and eggs were expensive goods back in the days. It is believed that the idea of cakes was born in the ancient Egyptians' culture. It is the first culture who showed good baking skills. They introduced cakes as a round flat breads that were cooked on a hot stone. Yeast was used to raise the cake instead of baking powder. On the other hand, based on other food historians, it is believed the first cakes were prepared by the ancient Greeks. Why is cake round? Well, based on the food historians, there is several theories behind the round shape of cakes. Generally speaking, cakes are believed to be round because in old days, cakes follow the same procedure as bread making. They were made by hands, shaped into balls, and baked on stones or shallow pans. When baked, the dough is naturally formed into rounded shape. By time, people started to use cake hoops to make cakes rounds, which is typically made by wood or steel and placed on a baking tray. Nowadays, baking pans exist in many different types and shapes. However, another theory behind the rounded shape of cakes is that in ancient times, some civilizations baked the cake for their religious ceremonies. They shaped it round to represent the cycle of life, the sun, and the moon. Some believes that candles are used to make the cake glow like the moon does. Different types of cake. When we bake at home, we categorize cakes by flavor, for example, chocolate cake, vanilla cake, fruit cake, or lemon cake, and many more, but professional bakers categorize cakes by their ingredients and the mixing method. So now let's dive into the basic types of cakes and a brief idea of the ingredient and the mixing method according to the professional bakers. Starting with butter cake. Butter cake is any cake that asks you to cream some butter with sugar as the first step. Eggs, flour, liquids, and a leavening agent such as baking powder or baking soda are added too. Chocolate, white, yellow, and marble cake falls in the category of butter cake. The only difference between white and yellow cake is that white cake uses egg whites only, whereas yellow cake uses the whole eggs, and sometimes an extra yolk is added too. The second type of cakes is pound cake. It is called pound cake because it is proportionally measured. For example, a pound of flour, a pound of butter, a pound of sugar, and a pound of eggs are mixed to give us a pound cake. In the case of pound cakes, leaveners or whipped egg white are used to raise this kind of cakes. Examples of pound cakes are coffee cakes, sour cream cakes, and fruit crumb cakes. Sponge cake. In short, sponge cakes are any cake that uses lots of whipped whole eggs or egg whites instead of baking powder and baking soda. Genoise cake is a type of sponge cakes. Sponge cakes are called Genoise cake in Italy and France. Genoise cake uses a beaten mix between whole eggs and sugar until a thick, ribbony mixture is created. They are light enough to be rolled up into a roulade. They can also be sliced into thin layers and showered with flavored syrup. Another type of sponge cake is called biscuit cakes. In the case of biscuit cakes, whole eggs are used but whipped separately. In other words, eggs white are whipped, eggs yolks are whipped, and then folded together. This results in a very chewy sponge cake. Ladyfingers are an example of biscuit cakes. Angel food cake. This type of cakes only uses egg whites in its batter. Egg whites are whipped with sugar and then mixed with the rest of the ingredient. An interesting fact about angel food cakes that it does not use any butter, which means it's fat-free. Chiffon cake. Unlike sponge cakes, it does include baking powder. It also uses vegetable oil. In this kind of cakes, eggs are separated. The egg whites are whipped to soft peaks and then folded into the batter. This results in a cake with tender crumb and rich flavor, similar to oil cakes, lighter in texture, similar to sponge cakes. Baked flourless cake. Baked cheesecake and flourless chocolate cake is an example that falls in this category of cakes. Unbaked flourless cake. Unbaked cheesecake and mousse cakes are examples of this kind of cakes. All this talking about cakes made me want to have some right now. Comment below. Which type of cakes is your favorite? Ever wondered why we place candles over cakes and what does candles means? Well, it is believed that the ancient Greeks placed candles to light their cakes up like a moon. They also believed that the smoke that comes out of the candle after blowing it will help to carry their prayers to their gods. So, when did the modern-day birthday celebration started? Germans were the first who celebrated birthday parties with cakes and candles. At that time, cakes were still bread-like and not too sweet as the modern cakes. The numbers of candles that are placed on the cake represent the age of the kid, and they usually place one more candle in the hope of the kid living another year. However, as we still do nowadays, they used to blow a candle and make a wish. Cake mixes. Cake mixes were introduced in 1930. It was, and it is still an easier way to make a cake at home. In the old days, making a cake was expensive, so cake mixes were an easier and a cheaper way to enjoy a cake at home. John D. Duff of P. Duff & Sons owned a Pittsburgh molasses company. Duff had an extra molasses, and as a way to make a use of it, he got the idea of dehydrating it and mix with flour, sugar, and dried eggs. Customers were only required to add water to the mixture to make a tasty gingerbread at home. In short, Duff was the first person who came with the idea of cake mixes. After World War II, cake mixes started to get more popular and many flour companies started to develop their own cake mixes, such as Betty Crocker, Pillsbury, and Duncan Hines. Cake mixes really made baking easier when you don't have the time to gather all the needed ingredients. On the other hand, you can always make your own warm homemade cake too and be creative with it. Cakes were always present in special occasions, such as birthdays, weddings, and holidays. In the old time, it is an honor to be given or celebrated with because back in the days sugar, spices, nuts, and dried fruit were expensive and hard to get. However, nowadays, cakes are not expensive and they are easy to get or bake, but they always carry the same message, which is, you are important to me and we love you.